Attraction doesn't begin with words. That's the first uncomfortable truth most people try to bypass. We live in a culture that overvalues technique. What to say, when to text, how to respond because it feels controllable. But desire doesn't respond to control. It responds to perception, and perception is shaped long before a sentence leaves your mouth. When a woman isn't interested, it's rarely because she's analyzed your personality in detail and rejected it logically. It's usually because something about your presence didn't register as compelling. Not bad, not wrong, just neutral. And neutrality is the real enemy of desire. What actually triggers attraction is how you show up in the world, your emotional posture, your level of self-containment, the way you occupy space physically, psychologically, socially. These things are read instantly and largely unconsciously. Human beings are wired to assess safety, competence, and value within seconds. Women in particular are highly attuned to emotional congruence. They don't just listen to what you say, they feel where it's coming from. If your words are confident, but your energy is seeking approval, the energy wins. If you're saying all the right things but subtly trying to be chosen, the psychology of first impressions and presence that need is felt, and need repels desire. Not because needing is bad, but because desire requires polarity. It requires two whole individuals, not one person trying to borrow worth from another. This is why attraction can grow even when interest wasn't initially there, because interest isn't static, it's responsive. When a man becomes more grounded in himself, less reactive, less performative, less invested in outcome, he becomes more interesting, not louder, not flashier, calmer, more intentional, and paradoxically more unpredictable in the best way. Confidence here isn't bravado. It's internal alignment. It's knowing who you are, what you value, and where you're going without needing external validation to prop it up. A man with purpose doesn't rush to be liked. He doesn't explain himself excessively. He doesn't audition. He engages, observes, and allows connection to unfold without forcing it. This creates psychological safety, which is often misunderstood. Safety doesn't mean boring or passive. It means emotional steadiness, the ability to hold tension without anxiety, to disagree without defensiveness, to flirt without expectation. When a woman senses that you're comfortable, whether she approves of you or not, something shifts. She relaxes. Curiosity replaces resistance. There's also an element of self-respect that can't be faked. How you treat your time, your boundaries, your attention. These signal value far more than compliments ever could. If you abandon your priorities the moment someone shows mild interest, you communicate scarcity. If you remain consistent, you communicate abundance. And desire is far more likely to grow in the presence of abundance. This doesn't mean being cold or indifferent. Indifference is just another strategy, and strategies always leak. It means being warm without being attached, interested without being invested too early, present without being consumed. That balance is felt viscerally from a psychological, why words don't create desire, energy does, perspective, attraction thrives on coherence. When your inner state matches your outer behavior, people trust you, even if they can't articulate why. From a philosophical perspective, this is about integrity, living in a way that isn't contingent on being chosen. When you're not trying to extract desire, you paradoxically make space for it. And this naturally sets the stage for the next layer of attraction, emotional connection. Because once someone feels intrigued by who you are, not what you're doing to impress them, they become open to feeling something with you. And once you're not clinging to outcome, you're able to create experiences rather than seek reassurance. But none of that happens if you're still trying to get interest instead of embodying something worth responding to. So if there's one thing to take from this, it's this. Desire isn't negotiated, it's evoked, and the most powerful way to evoke it is to become deeply rooted in who you are, whether anyone is watching or not. Once attraction is sparked by how you show up, the next question is whether it has somewhere to go. And this is where most connections quietly collapse. Not because attraction wasn't present, but because emotional connection never formed. Desire on its own is unstable. It needs emotional grounding to deepen, to last, and to feel safe enough to grow. A common misunderstanding is that emotional connection is created by talking more, revealing more, or accelerating intimacy. In reality, it's created by attunement, by your ability to read emotional cues, respond appropriately, and make someone feel seen without being interrogated. Emotional connection is less about disclosure and more about resonance. Women don't open emotionally because the emotional connection versus emotional oversharing man is impressive. They open when they feel understood. That understanding doesn't come from analysis or advice giving. It comes from presence, from listening without trying to fix, from allowing pauses, from letting emotions exist without rushing to manage them. When someone senses that they don't have to perform around you, their nervous system relaxes. And when the nervous system relaxes, attraction has room to expand. This is why creating emotional safety is foundational, not in the sense of being predictable or agreeable, but in being emotionally reliable, consistent in mood, clear in communication, non-reactive in the face of uncertainty. Emotional volatility, even when disguised as passion, creates instability, and instability forces self-P protection. Desire doesn't thrive under self-P protection. At the same time, emotional connection requires polarity. Safety alone leads to comfort, not attraction. There must be playfulness, challenge, and subtle tension. The difference is that this tension isn't anxious, it's alive. It's curiosity, not fear. You can disagree without withdrawing, tease without belittling, express interest without pressure. These nuances communicate emotional intelligence. Psychologically, this works because humans are wired to bond through shared emotional states: laughter, curiosity, reflection, even silence. These create micro moments of alignment. When a woman begins to associate your presence with positive emotional experiences, her perception shifts. You're no longer just a person she's evaluating. You become a feeling she wants to return to. Many men sabotage this stage by trying to fast-track desire into certainty. How women bond emotionally, ask for clarity too soon. They seek reassurance. They want to define the relationship before the emotional groundwork is laid. But desire unfolds through experience, not negotiation. When you allow connection to build organically, you give her space to arrive at desire on her own terms. And self-chire is always stronger than pressured interest. There's also an important philosophical layer here. Emotional connection requires humility, the willingness to not be in control of the outcome, to be curious rather than strategic. When you approach connection as something to explore rather than secure, you create authenticity. And authenticity is deeply attractive because it signals confidence without ego. This doesn't mean over-investing emotionally or losing boundaries. Emotional connection is not emotional dependence. In fact, the healthiest connections form when both people remain sovereign. You can care without clinging. You can be open without oversharing. You can be emotionally available without making someone else responsible for your emotional state. When a woman senses that you're emotionally present but not emotionally needy, something important happens. She feels free. Free to feel, free to choose, free to desire, And freedom is one of the most underrated ingredients of attraction. Desire that emerges from freedom is expansive, not anxious. It feels exciting rather than heavy. This is where emotional connection naturally bridges into deeper desire. Because once someone feels emotionally safe and emotionally stimulated, attraction stops being hypothetical. It becomes embodied. It lives in shared, the danger of chasing and seeking validation moments, in tone, in timing, in subtle shifts of attention. And from there, desire doesn't need to be chased. It unfolds. So the real question isn't how to make some E1 desire you. It's whether you can create the emotional conditions in which desire is allowed to exist. And the answer always comes back to this. When someone feels deeply understood without being controlled, desire doesn't need encouragement. It finds its own way forward. Once attraction has been sparked by presence and deepened through emotional connection, what ultimately determines whether desire solidifies or fades is detachment, not indifference, not withdrawal, but a grounded, self-respecting detachment that communicates one essential truth. Your sense of worth does not depend on being chosen. This is where many people become confused, because culturally we're taught that desire is fueled by pursuit, that if you want something badly enough, you prove it by chasing it. But psychologically, desire responds far more to choice than to pressure. A woman doesn't feel desire because she's convinced. She feels it because she chooses. And choice only exists when there is space. Detachment creates that space. When you are overly invested in a specific outcome, your behavior shifts in subtle but significant ways. You become hyper-attuned to reactions. You detachment, standards, and self-worth seek reassurance. You soften your boundaries. You tolerate dynamics that don't align with your values. None of this is dramatic, but all of it is perceptible. And what it communicates is scarcity of options, of self-rust, of internal stability. Scarcity collapses polarity. It turns attraction into negotiation. Detach me. NT, on the other hand, restores balance. It signals that you enjoy connection, but you don't require it to feel whole. You engage because you want to, not because you're afraid of losing. This psychological posture is deeply regulating to others. It says, I am here by choice, and you are free to choose to. And freedom, again, is a prerequisite for desire. This is also where standards become visible, not as demands, but as lived behavior. Your standards are revealed through what you tolerate, what you prioritize, and where you walk away. You don't need to announce them. In fact, announcing them often undermines them. When you calmly disengage from situations that don't align with your values, you communicate self-respect more powerfully than words ever could. From a psychological standpoint, this activates a reevaluation process. When someone senses that access to you is not guaranteed, they reassess your value, not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're not trying to be easy to keep. There's a difference. One is strategy, the other is identity. Philosophically, detachment is about non-attachment to outcome while remaining committed to integrity. You don't manipulate to be chosen, and why desire must be a choice, not pressure. Don't abandon yourself to avoid loss. You remain aligned with who you are regardless of the response. That kind of consistency is rare, and rarity heightens desire. It's important to clarify that detachment does not mean emotional distance. You can be warm, expressive, and engaged while still being unattached to a specific result. The distinction lies in whether you're sourcing your worth internally or externally. When your worth is internal, rejection doesn't destabilize you. It informs you. It becomes data, not a verdict. This is why the willingness to walk away is so powerful, not as a threat, but as a truth. When you know you'll be okay, regardless of the outcome, you stop bargaining with yourself. You stop shrinking. You stop over-explaining. And paradoxically, this often creates the very desire you are trying to secure. Women are especially sensitive to this final message on attraction and self-respect dynamic because it mirrors emotional maturity. Someone who can hold connection without clinging demonstrates emotional regulation. Someone who can release without resentment demonstrates strength. Both are deeply attractive traits, not just romantically, but relationally. And when a woman feels that choosing you is genuinely her choice, not something she's being subtly maneuvered into, desire becomes clean. It's not mixed with guilt, pressure, or obligation. It's rooted in respect, and respect is what allows desire to endure beyond novelty. This brings everything full circle. Presence creates attraction. Emotional connection allows it to grow. Detachment and standards protect it from becoming distorted. Together they form a dynamic where desire is not chased, but invited. So if there's one final idea to leave with, it's this. The strongest form of attraction is not created by trying to be desired. It created by being someone who does not abandon himself to be chosen.